What's more dangerous than a liberal judge? A conservative one who pretends to stay loyal until it matters most. Not all wars are fought with bullets. Some are fought with gavels. And not every betrayal comes with a knife. Some come sealed in a Supreme Court decision. Washington didn't just get hit with a legal curveball. It got leveled by a judicial earthquake. And not because of what the ruling was, but who delivered it. Justice Amy Coney Barrett, Trump's crown jewel of the bench, once hailed as the ideological heir to Scalia. Sharp, strict, untouchable. The hammer of originalism. The final trump card in his conservative revolution. And now, Barrett voted against Trump. Not over some obscure civil case or a technical tax dispute. No, she crossed the line in a case that cuts into the core of sovereignty, survival, and national security. This was about the Alien Enemies Act, a resurrected 1798 law invoked not as a political stunt, but as a last-ditch defense. It targeted Venezuelan gang members, blood-soaked, armed, and operating inside American neighborhoods. We deported them legally, Trump muttered, eyes glued to the live broadcast. With precedent, with urgency, for public safety. He stared harder at the screen. And she wants him back. The words dropped like a gavel in a courtroom that had just turned against its judge. No modern president has had to watch a Supreme Court justice he handpicked, hand-defended, and hand-delivered to the highest bench in the land turn around and swing that same gavel against him. Barrett, the woman Trump fought to protect from Senate interrogations, media assaults, and ideological firestorms. The woman he shielded, now using her shield against him. But Barrett didn't just vote. She sided with those who believe that even foreign nationals with cartel affiliations are entitled to full procedural rights. Due process for machete-wielding murderers. Trump's jaw clenched. I thought the Constitution was meant to protect Americans, he said, not hand out legal favors to cartel enforcers. This wasn't just legal anymore. It was strategic, personal, existential. Was it jurisprudence or sabotage, an honest interpretation or betrayal wearing robes? Trump didn't have all the answers, but he knew this. I gave her the gavel. Now she's using it to slam it down on my hand. And so the war shifted. No longer Trump versus the liberal establishment. Now, Trump versus the insider who opened the gate from within. To understand how deep the blade went, you have to rewind to a courtroom in D.C., the Dodd versus Department of Homeland Security case. No grand gavel, no fanfare, but everyone in that chamber sat upright, like something unseen had just scraped the spine of a nation. Presiding, Judge James Busberg, silver hair, razor-sharp glasses, voice like polished steel. He opened the file. 31 names, Venezuelan nationals, all flagged with suspected links to Trinagua, a gang now branded a tier 1 domestic threat. All 31 were set for emergency removal under a fresh executive order. And Judge Busberg was preparing to block it. His voice cut clean through the courtroom. Urgency is not the same as authority. This court does not serve panic. It serves principle. He paused, letting the words settle. We don't secure borders by dismantling constitutional process. And we don't uphold law by stripping people of dignity. Each sentence hit like iron wrapped in velvet, measured but lethal. The journalists in the front row didn't just hear a ruling. They heard a message. And it didn't originate with Busberg. In the corner of the case file, a footnote citation, an echo of precedent. 2024, Barrett. No one spoke her name. They didn't need to. The legal framework he just delivered was a mirror of her opinion. For the skeptics, there was one more detail. A call received by Busberg's clerk the night before. Unlisted, unrecorded. One sentence. They'll need a voice. Now, they had one. Busberg wasn't just ruling. He was amplifying. They are not convicts. They are individuals who have not yet stood trial. And if we normalize executive action that erases one group's legal status, what stops it from erasing yours next? That wasn't a caution. It was a warning shot, delivered from the bench, cloaked in constitutional reverence. The media ignited. MSNBC, a victory for compassion. CNN, Barrett doctrine shapes landmark ruling. Social media exploded. Hashtag due process matters. Hashtag families belong together. Hashtag law not fear. But blocks away, in the West Wing, hashtags couldn't muffle the sound of sirens or the fury building behind closed doors. Trump sat in the Oval Office, frozen in place, eyes tracking the ticker. He said nothing, not at first. Only when Barrett's name scrolled across the cheer-in did he speak. No fury, no raised voice, just a line cold clipped final. Another judge playing politics, and someone else letting them. He stood. Behind him, the screen still glowed. Justice Barrett cited in deportation block. He turned to his chief of staff, voice sharp as an order on a battlefield. Get DHS legal counsel. Emergency briefing. Now, 30 minutes later, the White House Situation Room was packed. Homeland Security legal advisors, the head of ICE, the deputy director of intelligence. A glowing digital map lit up the wall, 12 states highlighted in red. Daragua cartel activity. The DHS deputy leaned in. Confirmed use of front warehouses. NGO accounts funded by federal grants. Encrypted domestic communications active. A thud. The lead counsel dropped a thick file on the table. 31 individuals detained by ICE in the last 48 hours. All released this morning by court order. Cited source: Supreme Court precedent, fall term 2024. He paused, lowered his voice. Authored by Justice Amy Coney Barrett. Trump didn't raise his voice. He sat, opened a side drawer, and pulled out a weathered parchment. The Alien Enemies Act of 1798. His fingers ran along its faded edge. Cartels don't need guns, he muttered. They've got case law, and someone behind that law wears a robe. An attorney hesitated. Mr. President, that act hasn't been used since World War II. Invoking it would set a dangerous precedent. Trump's eyes never left the document. His hand moved to the pen beside it. What's more dangerous, a precedent or a court ruling that gets more people killed than bullets ever could? He signed. One stroke, unshaken. The Alien Enemies Act was active again. No appeals, no hearings, only extraction, then silence. Trump's eyes locked on a footnote in the DHS report. Judicial precedent influenced by SCOTUS Justice Barrett. He didn't yell. He didn't flinch. He simply turned to his chief of staff. Bring her in. Alone. No aides. No cameras. No transcripts. The East Wing hallway felt like a cathedral after a funeral. Barrett entered. No makeup. No notes. Just tight-pinned hair and the eyes of someone who already knew why she'd been summoned. Trump stood facing the window. The light behind him cast a long, blade-like shadow across the marble floor, splitting the room into two halves, illumination and judgment. His voice, when it came, was calm but ice-cold. I remember the day you took the oath, he said. Hand on the Constitution. You looked me in the eye and promised to defend the law, without fear, without favor. He turned. His gaze pierced through her. Now I wonder, did you look through me that day? Like I was just a stepping stone to a theory I'd never be allowed to question. Barrett didn't step back, but when she spoke, her voice was soft. The kind of soft that, in Washington, means frost. I kept my oath. I've upheld the Constitution. I've taken no side. Trump cut in. Not taking a side is taking a side, Amy. You know that. Everyone does. He moved closer. Now, just a narrow table between them. 31 were released. Not because they were innocent, but because of procedure. You didn't have to sign an order. All you had to do was let your precedent speak for you. Barrett met his gaze, unwavering. If someone hasn't been convicted, they still have rights. And if fear alone is enough to erase those rights, then the Constitution is nothing more than a framed slogan on the wall. Trump nodded, not in agreement, but in finality. The kind of nod that says, I've heard enough. The problem isn't that you're wrong. It's that you're afraid, not of being mistaken, but of being disliked. You think staying above the fight keeps you clean. But clean doesn't save the dead. Barrett replied, calm but firm. I don't write law based on fear. I don't judge from headlines or blood. And I sure as hell don't rewrite the Constitution for a midnight order. Trump took one last step forward. His voice dropped, not to intimidate, but to deliver a final sentence. I don't need you to defend me. I need you to stand with this country. And tonight, I see you standing outside its borders." Barrett didn't reply, but her fingers curled slightly at her side. Trump looked at her once more, not with fury, not even disappointment, just clarity, the kind that comes after betrayal. "I don't need you to lie. I just need you not to bow to those who hide knives and legal doctrine." He turned. His footsteps echoed down the hall, crisp and unbroken. Barrett didn't move. No retreat, no advance. But between them, the pillar of trust had collapsed. Less than 24 hours later, every camera lens in the country pointed toward one place: the Supreme Court. This wasn't just a courtroom, it was a battlefield. Laws would be spoken like scripture. Truth would be shaved down into slogans. And every sentence could ignite a civil war of ideas. Inside, every seat was filled. Every stare was a headline waiting to go live. And in this new era of live stream justice, where a tweet outweighs a transcript, this wasn't about law anymore. It was about who controls the narrative. Outside, the media drew their battle lines. MSNBC led with a flashing graphic: tyranny in the name of security. CNN walked the tightrope: a historic test of presidential power or wartime overreach. Fox News skipped subtlety altogether. Supreme showdown, borders versus the bench. Inside, Trump's legal team made their case. Tight, sharp, and pulled straight from the Constitution. A sovereign nation doesn't just have the right. It has the duty to protect its borders. The Alien Enemies Act isn't theoretical. It's historical. It was written for moments of undeclared war. And if this, cartels, asymmetrical warfare, transnational violence, doesn't qualify as war, then the word war means nothing at all. The room held its breath. And then, all eyes turned to her. Because if hypocrisy ever had a courtroom, this was it. Amy Coney Barrett had just anointed herself the high priestess of modern jurisprudence. Let's be honest, this wasn't a judicial hearing. It was a sanctified TED Talk brought to you by the Coalition for Border Abolition, live-streamed directly from the Cathedral of Progressive Sentiment. There she sat, framed by solemn marble columns meant to embody constitutional restraint. But her words weren't law. They were a sermon of moral guilt, painted in rhetoric, glossed with performative conscience. And right on cue, Barrett leaned into the mic, eyes sharp, scalpel precise. Her voice was calm, clipped, almost surgical. The Alien Enemies Act was passed before women could vote, before civil rights were recognized, before we understood that loyalty isn't determined by birthplace. She paused, letting silence echo her moral authority. The question before us isn't just legal. It's whether we're upholding law or reviving its old prejudices. Saikinen broadcast it without a blink. MSNBC turned it into performance art. One breathless commentator gushed: Barrett doesn't just interpret the Constitution, she elevates it. But Barrett was far from done. Law must serve justice, not fear. And age doesn't make a statute sacred. Sometimes what's old is simply dangerous. The message was crystal clear. Barrett wasn't just questioning one law. She was redrawing the philosophical lines of national self-defense and casting suspicion on its very foundation. Across the aisle, Trump's legal team didn't so much as flinch. They knew what had just happened. The battlefield had shifted. Barrett's closing words from the morning session still hung in the air like a gavel suspended in motion. The court had recessed. The cameras were off. Clerks had cleared the floor. But then, a single figure stepped into the chamber. No summons, no script, just Donald J. Trump, walking alone into the marble echo of a system he once shaped, and now stood betrayed by. Barrett hadn't moved. Still seated, still robed, still composed. Hands folded, posture regal, gaze untouched. But she knew why he had come. This wasn't a negotiation. This was the line in the sand. There would be no oral arguments, no cross-examinations, just two people, one confrontation, and a final reckoning, made entirely of words. The air grew thick with the kind of tension that fills the void before thunder. And then Barrett spoke, calmly, but with fire under the surface. I don't oppose you, Mr. President. I oppose the kind of man you're becoming. Trump paused. A long silence, then a dry, humorless smile. You're not opposing me. You're opposing reality. You want the law to smell like jasmine, even if corpses are rotting across the border. Barrett tilted her head, graceful but glacial. I want a country where law isn't twisted by the emotion of a single administration. I didn't take this bench to shield your indignation. Trump's hand slammed against the table, not out of rage, but finality. His voice dropped, low and resonant, like a door creaking open in a crypt. No, you wear that robe to hide. You hide behind principle so you never have to choose a side. You call it fear when I protect this country. But what do you protect? The fentanyl smugglers in freezer trucks? The cartel messengers disguised as refugees? Barrett's hand tightened into a fist, subtle but unmistakable. I protect the Constitution, even when it's not trending. I defend limits, because without them, your power becomes the very monster you swore to destroy. Trump let out a low, bitter laugh. And there it is, Ivy League legal poetry. Catching criminals is oppression. Securing borders is fascism-like. And stopping killers is somehow tyranny. He leaned forward, voice barely above a whisper. You're not dissenting, Amy. You're auditioning for a column in The Atlantic. How I was nominated by Trump and found my conscience in robes. Barrett's face didn't flinch. If you believe every act of dissent is performance, then you've forgotten that not everyone who walks away is a coward. Some leave because they've finally woken up. Trump nodded slowly, no shock in his face, only a weathered kind of disappointment. So you're awake now, huh? Then tell me, what good is being awake if you let people die while you quote Rousseau? I don't need a philosopher in robes. I need someone who can look at victims without blinking. Barrett sat up straighter, spine steel. And I don't need a president who treats the nation like it's his private property. Justice does not report to its executive. It stands above him. If you think disagreement equals betrayal, then you don't need a judge. You need a puppet. The silence that followed was so thick it might as well have had weight. No pen clicked. No throat cleared. Trump said nothing. He didn't yell, didn't break, just stared at her. Long, steady, cold. Then, without a word, he turned, not in retreat, but as though the next move had already been decided. That's when Busberg entered. His timing felt almost mythical, like a heartbeat echoing through marble halls. He stepped out from the gallery like a man moving to center stage in a Greek tragedy. Not as a judge, but as a harbinger. A silver-haired, sharp-eyed reminder that every court has its ghost. And tonight, the court was haunted by truth. Everyone in that room already knew who he was. They just didn't yet know what he'd say next. A morality sewn in golden thread, handed down from on high, never once burdened by its own consequences. That's how Barrett began, not with a ruling, but with a canvas, as though the outcome had already been nailed to the wall. A nation is only strong when its laws feel no shame. She never looked at Trump when she said it, but no one in the chamber questioned who her words were meant for. Busberg picked up the thread like it had been passed to him in rehearsal. What we're witnessing, he said, isn't legal debate. It's the slow resurrection of something this country once bowed its head in shame over. Interment without trial, mass expulsion, executive authority cloaked in fear. He paused just long enough for the camera to capture a flicker of hesitation on a swing vote justice's face. Pens froze mid-sentence. Then, CNN broke in with a banner alert. SCOTUS divided. Resistance from within. The bench teetered. Trump remained silent. But silence has a gravity when it belongs to someone who knows exactly when to speak. Then he stood. No podium, no script, just a voice that carried the ache of a car crash everyone remembers, but no one wants to admit they caused. Carlos, 8 years old, shot in the back while riding his bike. His killer? A gang member we detained, then released because the court decided the Spanish interpreter wasn't certified. A reporter shifted his mic, not to capture sound, but to check if the air itself was still breathing. Trump didn't shout. He didn't have to. That child didn't need due process. He needed one more day alive. Busberg tried to interrupt the ever-measured moralist. "We don't legislate from tears, Mr. President." But Trump cut in, eyes sharp and glinting like surgical steel. "No, but someone in this room is writing policy in lipstick and calling it justice." He opened a leather folder, not filled with briefs, but with truth. 13 names, 13 Americans, ages, photos, time of death, cause. Everyone killed by someone protected under the system Barrett and Busberg had just sanctified. What law kept them alive? Trump asked. What court spared them from a knife, a cord, or the back of a refrigerated truck? Justice Kavanaugh, the deciding vote, closed his folder. He didn't look at his notes. He stared at the floor, as if weighing souls, not statutes. Barrett could feel it. The Busberg alliance? Fading, like yesterday's headline dissolving on CNN scroll. Still, she pushed back, her voice a control blade. What happens tomorrow, Mr. President, when grief walks back into this court? Do we rule by sorrow? Does emotion author the Constitution? Trump didn't raise his voice. He simply took one step back, then said, "I don't measure justice in tears. I measure it in corpses. And I stand with the ones who are still breathing." It wasn't a closing argument. It was a verdict. A court clerk rose, his tone flat and metallic. The court will now proceed to closing statements. Each side is allotted 5 minutes. No one moved. No one needed to. Barrett gripped the lectern with both hands. Her face, a mask carved by legacy and silence. Busberg nodded, his presence humming like the overture to a final act. They didn't step forward to debate. They came to finish what they had already decided. Busberg spoke first, every syllable polished, his logic clean, cold, honed like a scalpel. The Constitution is not a canvas for fear. If today we legalize executive power over the unconvicted, then tomorrow, innocence itself becomes a technicality. He paused long enough for a camera to catch another swing vote, narrowing his eyes. MSNBC had its headline, "Executive Overreach on Trial, the Bench versus Power." Trump didn't rise, didn't interrupt. He only nodded to an aide. A thin envelope was handed across to Barrett. On the front, written in red ink, "Test cases classified." Barrett opened it. Inside, 3 internal ICE memos, 3 detainees, 3 separate court interventions, 3 dead Americans, all within 6 months of release. No commentary, no narrative, just raw facts. Stamped, signed, authorized, by her. Her grip tightened. Busberg leaned in, whispered something meant to soothe, perhaps a moral tourniquet. But Barrett said nothing, because now she saw it. She wasn't holding the torch of liberty. She'd been passing out robes and shields to monsters. She hadn't misunderstood the law. She'd armored it, so the wolves could walk free. Trump didn't take the podium. "I don't need you to understand me," he said. "I need you to look at what you let happen." He didn't beg. He didn't mourn. He listed, each name like a gavel drop, each life lost, an indictment carved in stone. One of the undecided justices placed a hand on the file, skimmed the pages, and murmured, "You can't protect process when the process produces bodies." There was no rebuttal, no response, because reason had just surrendered to reality. The vote, 5-4. Barrett dissented, but no one turned. No one asked for her remarks. No one on that bench looked her way again. The country hadn't fallen to liberal judges. It had fallen to those who remembered how to pretend to be liberal just when it mattered most. Busberg tried to object. He stood, began to speak, but no one invited him, because even reason had just recused itself. A red seal marked the last page of the court's decision. Petition granted. Lower court reversed. The executive order would go into effect immediately. Just like that, a pen came to rest, and with it, a nation rewrote itself without waiting for approval. No speeches, no ceremony, just ink in place of permission. Outside, night fell over the White House like a silent blizzard no one had predicted. In the Oval Office, the soft amber glow of a desk lamp cast long shadows across a large map of the southern border. Red circles marked hotspots, recent, raw, unresolved. To the left, CNN looped the hearing. Trump reading off names. Barrett frozen mid-frame. clutching a folder like a confession. Busberg silenced mid-sentence. The anchor's tone was grave, reverent, like delivering a eulogy for the Constitution. A seismic ruling. A dark day for judicial restraint. The words drifted through the air like static. Not even language anymore, just noise from a world that still believed truth was up for debate. On the desk sat a photo frame. Trump and Barrett, 2020. The day of her nomination. A firm handshake, polished smiles. Once a monument to legacy. Now evidence. He didn't tear it, didn't burn it, didn't turn it face up. He simply laid it face down, right on top of the map, over a region labeled federal security priority. She was no longer inside the lines he had sworn to protect. His hand moved toward the phone, paused, then pulled back. There would be no call tonight. No one left to explain it to. And then, after a long moment, he spoke. Not to an advisor, not into a recorder, but into a country still piecing together what had just happened. One day, they'll call this a victory. But all I see is a list of names. We waited too damn long to start rewriting. Outside the tall windows, fireworks erupted across the Washington sky. Cheers spilled from Lafayette Square and echoed toward the West Wing. Somewhere, someone had already posted the tweet of the year. But Trump didn't take a stage. No velvet curtain, no lights, no rehearsed defiance, just silence, and the low, old frequency of a radio like Roosevelt used. When words weren't performance, they were command. His voice didn't rise. It settled calm, solid, weighty, like a hand on the table before the final move. There was a time I believed in process, that rules and codes could hold the line. But I've seen what happens when good men follow rules. While evil rewrites the game. He paused. Just a breath. Sharp. Truth-bound. Justice isn't automatic. It needs a hand to lift the pen, a voice to say, this far and no further. And then one last line, not crafted for applause, but carved for memory. They wanted mercy with clean hands. I chose blood in a country still breathing. If you love this incredible story, make sure to hit the subscribe button, like the video, and share it.